Ja, schönen Nachmittag and good afternoon, everybody. Also from my side, thanks for being with us this far along in the program. I really think we've covered a lot of ground today. I mean, we've tackled top topics like AI in Germany, but also standardization, robotics, AI and new work, sustainability, then diversity, security, all along the way. All of which, of course, play out in an international, yes, even global context. And that's why I'm really thrilled. My name is Patrick Gilroy. I'm the head of AI and education at the TÜV Association. And I'd like to welcome a guest that can enrich and enlarge our international perspective in our AI conference today. Catelijne Muller is the president of ALLAI. That's an independent organization promoting responsible AI. Hello, Catelijne. You were a member of the EU high-level group on AI, advising the European Commission, but also you've advised the European Economic and Social Committee, the OECD, MEPs, which we've had with us today, national governments and parliaments on the impact of AI, and especially also on the impact of AI on human rights, on democracy, so very timely topics, the rule of law. Catelijne is a master's of law, and she's worked as a Dutch lawyer for well over a decade. Catelijne, it's great to have you on. And the question before us today is, should we regulate AI like our lives depend on it?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick, for having me. Just a small clarification, the organization that I founded is named ALLAI, much like the English term for ally. So the question that you just posed to me, should we regulate AI like our lives depend on it? It was suggested by TÜV, but it immediately struck a chord with me. Because unfortunately, over the past couple of years, we have seen instances where people's lives literally depended on AI. A self-driving car from Tesla killed a pedestrian when it misidentified her as a plastic bag floating in the wind. The Dutch childcare benefits scandal, which I think is the largest AI scandal of Europe, led to at least one suicide. It also led to 14,000 children being taken from their parents, many of whom have still to return. And it drove numerous people into poverty, joblessness, bankruptcy, and mental disability, basically destroying their lives. According to Frances Haugen, the Facebook's whistleblower, Facebook's ranking algorithm is fanning and ethnic violence in Ethiopia as we speak. It supposedly also led to the herding of Rohingya in Bangladesh and the imprisonment of Uyghurs in China. And Twitter's algorithm supposedly played a role in the January 6th invasion of the US Capitol, in which 6 people lost their lives. But also in the medical field, AI chatbots and patient advisory systems, often using large language models, have shown to deliver hallucinant, incorrect, and sometimes even life-threatening medical advice. And of course, there's the discussion on lethal autonomous weapons, where AI systems could directly take lives. So my answer to the question, should we regulate AI like our lives depend on it, is yes, we definitely should. Much like we regulate airplanes. They can bring us to beautiful places, but they can also kill us. And chemicals, they can help us treat diseases, but they are very toxic and they can also harm us. And of course, the phrase, like our lives depend on it, is metaphorical, but it captures quite well what we should do in a literal sense. We should regulate AI like society, like our fundamental rights, our democracy, and our rule of law depend on it. So I welcome the AI Act and the AI Treaty by the Council of Europe, for that matter. Both try to regulate AI from the perspective of fundamental rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Because that is exactly where the pain is. Looking at our fundamental rights, for example, most people think of the rights impacted by AI are the right to non-discrimination and the right to privacy. But AI can have an impact on virtually all fundamental rights. For example, AI that is used to predict criminal behavior could impact the right to a reasonable suspicion, when the prediction is not based on an actual suspicion, but on the fact that the suspect happens to share some characteristics with other suspects. Biometric recognition not only impacts the right to privacy, but could also impact the right to demonstration. When people become hesitant to partake in peaceful demonstrations for the fear of being watched all the time. Algorithmic management at the workplace could impact the right to a health and safety workplace, when workers are being assessed, evaluated, and scored based on virtually everything that they do, from keystrokes to driving speed, for example. So I welcome the AI Act and the AI Treaty, but there's also room for improvement, in particular for the AI Act, because the AI Treaty is not out yet, as we all know. And we might talk about that more elaborately, Patrick, later on, but just give you a couple of examples. The prohibition of biometric identification in the AI Act, if you look at that closely, it prohibits only a very narrow set of AI practices and only in the field of law enforcement. And it also only prohibits biometric systems that are intended to identify a person. But many biometric systems don't identify people at all. They are, for example, aimed at assessing behavior, assessing our gait, our heart rate, our micro-expressions to see if we're lying, for example, or at categorizing us into different groups, blonde woman, dark-skinned men, etc. And these types of biometric recognition will remain allowed under the AI Act. Another element that I think we should be aware of is that the list of high-risk AI tools or high-risk AI systems, also known as Annex 3, includes a lot of AI practices that are still heavily debated, both from the perspective of efficacy as well as from the perspective of acceptability. And I do worry that the AI Act will give these systems the blessing of regulation and normalize their use and silence that debate. I think we should seriously ask the question of whether we want AI to do all the things that it now supposedly can do according to Annex 3 of the AI Act. I want to keep this short because I want to have this conversation with you, Patrick, but almost all the events that I started with took place where there were already ethics guidelines in place, such as the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI. So I think it's no surprise that Europe is now regulating it. But is there still room for ethics after Europe has regulated it? I think there is, because ethics can serve many purposes, and one of which is it can be a stepping stone for regulation that the world is not ready for yet. That's basically what happened in Europe. It can help you interpret the laws once they are determined and set. But most importantly, I think, is that ethics can help you go the extra mile, go beyond the bare minimum of the law. So yes, we should regulate AI like our lives depend on it, but we should also be willing to go the extra mile and keep asking question zero. Do we want a particular AI system with the impact that it has, with the society that it shapes? Do we want that in the first place or not? And I would love to go to your questions, Patrick. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catelijne, for this amazing tour de force overview. I think it also really came across in your elaboration the real risks that we face with AI, which of course today and on the conference, and I think rightly so, we really want to focus also on the opportunities and the potential that we thrive to unlock with this cutting-edge future technology. But I think in the examples or even scandals that you brought up, it's already clear that your answer to the question, should we regulate AI like our lives depend on it, is not an exaggeration to pose the question this way, but you definitely answer in the affirmative, yes, because sometimes they do. So in a way, if I think back of this robot that we had walking around today here with one of our young founders from N Robotics, which by the way, you can still check out all of the virtual booths online, please do so. It's a good example of this human-machine interaction where the robot essentially is technology neutral. It can be used for good. For example, precisely this type of manufactured robot is used as we speak to clear landmines in Ukraine, in the liberated towns there after the Russian war of aggression, but at the same time, it can hurt my child. So in a way, I would like to bridge over again to something you mentioned. I really liked your formulation of the blessing of regulation. We often, and I think my colleague Johannes Kröner this morning in the panel on the EU AI Act, he really brought this across, that regulation, there's often this warning of over-regulation. The moment we hear the word, we immediately get this reflex of saying, oh, it's supports over-regulation. And if I understood you correctly, you say the EU AI Act is a chance, but does it already strike the right balance of, on the one hand, regulating the real risks, and on the other hand, leaving ample space for innovation?
I think that it does. I hear a lot the argument that we should not regulate or we should not talk about ethics because it will stifle innovation, and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Regulation has a couple of purposes and also a couple of advantages if you abide by them. First and foremost, it sets a level playing field. It makes you know and be certain that your competitor can do exactly the same as you can do and nothing else. I think that is an improvement, especially also for the small and medium enterprises. The other thing is that it can serve as a stepping stone for innovation if you look at the AI Act thoroughly, because it's not at all unreasonable, the demands that the AI Act sets. And it is also even, it's almost like a roadmap. It helps you step by step through the process of improving your AI system. So in the end, at the end of the day, we will come with better AI tools that are of a higher quality, that are safer, that respect our privacy, that respect our fundamental rights. And that should be something that we should strive for. And then you can have innovation flourish. And it is not that difficult to abide by the rules of the AI Act. It might be something that you don't want to do because you were used to doing something completely different, but that was not allowed in the first place. So what the AI Act is doing, it is giving you the tools to abide, to comply with what you had to comply with in the first place, which is respecting fundamental rights, making sure that people are safe, making sure that people remain healthy.
Right, but Catelijne, of course, the rules also have to be good by which we should abide. So let me ask you something. AI can increasingly talk, paint, write. It can often creatively transfer text to audio, to visuals. We have seen deepfakes, etc., but also a lot of great opportunities in that sphere. Can we briefly talk about general purpose AI or GPAI, the so-called foundational models? Is this a regulatory blind spot or already sufficiently included in the EU AI Act, for example?
It's a highly contested issue, to be honest, in the discussion on the AI Act. But let me go back to your first statement. AI can write, for example. There's a lot of discussion going on whether AI can actually write like humans write. For example, Gary Marcus says no. AI can never understand language with all its particularities and interpretations as humans do. What it does is it looks at correlations between words. It looks at what word comes logically before one word and after another word, and what sentence comes before one word and after another word. It's a completely different form of writing than the writing that we as humans do. So that is something that we need to know. If we know that, we can use it for many things, but we cannot use it to do what humans do because it does something completely different. It is not surprising that the latest Meta large language model, Galactica, was taken down only after 3 days. This system was trained on a vast amount of scientific literature and promised to spit out scientific knowledge, scientific papers even, if you will, or abstracts. And it made the most ridiculous mistakes. So it was taken down only after 3 days. And that is what I'm trying to say here. The systems do not write like humans. The systems do not think like humans. The element of general purpose AI is a very interesting element. I've heard the term general purpose AI only after the AIA was presented. I had never heard it before. I had heard artificial general intelligence, which is something completely different. But general purpose AI seems to be a framing that was chosen in order to exclude types of systems that do a general thing, but I think they do a rather specific thing. They write or they see something or they translate. So I don't think that it is all that general. But we now have the discussion at European level whether these systems should be included in the AIA, excluded, or whether they should have a separate status. I think they should be included in the AIA for several reasons. First and foremost, these systems can radiate, if they fail, because they're so widely used in so many domains and so many downstream AI systems, they can radiate harms down to a large number of AI systems and as a result to a larger part of society. That is the first reason. The second reason is that you will place, if you exclude general purpose AI from the AI Act, you will place the burden of complying with the Act completely on the downstream user. And I think that that, in fact, will stifle innovation. Because if I were a downstream user, and I hear of some Galactica that was taken down after only 3 days, and I have to comply with the AI Act, I'm not going to use Galactica. I'm too afraid of being liable if there's something wrong with it. So I think that also for those organizations that want to exclude general purpose AI from the scope of the AI Act, it's not a smart idea. I think it will stifle their innovation as well. It will stifle the uptake of their systems as well.
Catelijne, what's your take on the elephant in the room, which of course we've heard today accompanies the EU AI Act, which is in a concert of wider regulatory efforts, the Data Act, the Cybersecurity, Cyber Resilience Act, you have the Digital Services Act, but of course you also have the EU AI Act and its accompanying EU AI Liability Directive. Let me pose the question to you. If things break, of course we follow the precautionary principle in Europe, but if things go wrong, who's responsible for any damage with AI, and especially with GPAI and the downstream providers, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I get that. I get a lot of these types of questions, and I also get a lot of strange responses. In the very beginning, I think that's about 4 or 5 years ago, when we were first talking about AI and the impact of AI, there were even people that were proposing establish a legal personality for AI systems. That would mean that the AI system themselves would be liable for actions that cause damage. And when I asked people, why would you do that? They said, well, if I build something and I send it out in the world and it does something that I did not expect and it causes harm, how can I even be liable? And then I always replied with the example of the dog biting the child. If a dog bites a child, we cannot say the dog is responsible. The owner of the dog is responsible. Even if the child kicks a ball into a window of a neighbor, the child is not responsible. The parents are responsible. So what I always say is that we have structures, we have liability structures that exist, that we can tap into, that we can use to make sure that responsibility and liability ends up with exactly the right organization or the right person, and is not moved down or kicked as it can kick down the road or moved downstream to other users. I think that, for example, if you build something that is supposed to recognize things, computer vision, and you want it to be used in detecting tumors in healthcare, you better make sure that your system that detects things works well, especially when it's supposed to help detect tumors.
Agreed. So and I think that's where you also made clear that third-party independent inspections might have a big role to play, especially if I understood you correctly, you're in favor of enlarging rather the high-risk category of AI when it comes to the EU AI Act. But if I may, let's bridge in terms of our time also already to the block of 1 or 2 more questions on the geopolitical dimensions. I mean, in a book, The Age of AI, by the interesting author collaboration of the German-born ex-US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, the ex-Google CEO Eric Schmidt, and MIT computer scientist Daniel Huttenlocher, the EU's AI Act is actually praised as a societal pioneering work of a continent on a journey on its way. And they write, and I quote, decision makers, quote, shouldn't assume total victory is possible in each commercial and tech contest. Instead, we must recognize that prevailing requires a definition of success a society can sustain over time. And also today, we've often heard this race of the systems metaphor. Is that something you agree with, Catelijne? And is our European way on track?
I think that I can agree with the fact that AI is a system technology. It has so many implications in virtually all fields. It can be used in all fields, but it has also implications in all fields. If you would map out, for example, what kind of regulations there could apply to AI beyond the AI Act, you get an enormous map, because AI was never an unregulated technology. It always had to deal with non-discrimination. We were never allowed to discriminate. The government was never allowed to discriminate, not by a person, not by an AI system. So I think it's a system technology. I fully agree. I think that Europe has chosen a very interesting path with combining a product regulation with the elements of fundamental rights so closely that I think that could be an interesting approach. What I do worry about is the enforceability of the AI Act, because if you want to enforce what is in there, you need to have a lot of people that know a lot about artificial intelligence, know a lot about human rights, know a lot about the impact on workers, know a lot about all kinds of laws, administrative laws, what have you. So you would also need ethicists, you would need a broad scope of people to be able to do that. And I worry whether all the authorities in all the member states are capable. Even in my country, in the Netherlands, our authorities, we have a lot of authorities, are struggling to keep up with all kinds of digital supervision that they have to do, let alone countries where there's only one authority, for example.
Mm-hmm. And maybe one last question to you, Catelijne. If we should regulate AI like our lives depend on it, a little bit similar to climate change, which story you wish we'll be able to tell grandchildren about what our generations did on AI?
I wish I could tell our grandchildren that we made sure that despite the technology that takes over a lot of what we can do on a cognitive level also, that we managed to develop it and use it in such a way that they remained autonomous, that they remained people, that they were not herded, that they were not scored all the time, for example. I would love to be able to say we managed to have you retain your human autonomy in everything that you do, in all decisions that you make, in how you live your lives, in how you go about your days, because that is where AI has the most impact, I think.
Great. Thank you so much, Catelijne, for your insights and for being with us today. And everybody, please do check out ALLAI's work. Sorry for mispronouncing that earlier. I personally found this and, of course, our entire conference not only informative, but very inspiring. And so I'd like to hand back, with so much to digest today, back to Laura with a heartfelt thanks also for a great job moderating today. And let's hear what she and Joachim Bühler have as wrap-up insights for us. Thanks.